the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have an important panel of witnesses before us today, and I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. I'd now like to formally introduce our great panel of witnesses. Aaron Heike served as an agent with the United States Border Patrol for over 25 years before retiring in July of 2023. During his time with the Border Patrol, he was stationed in Arizona, Minnesota, Maine, Washington, D.C., Montana, North Dakota, and California. He held multiple positions to include Patrol Agent in Charge, Associate Chief and Deputy Chief Patrol Agent, before finishing his career as Chief Patrol Agent of Grand Forks Sector and San Diego Sector. Mr. Heike earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminology from the University of Minnesota at Duluth and a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of North Dakota School of Law. Ms. Patty Morin was born in New York City and has 6 children. She was a stay-at-home mom for 25 years and homeschooled her children. She returned to the workforce after the oldest child graduated high school and entered the mortgage banking industry for 6 years. She then pivoted and spent 10 years in retail management until she retired. She is currently retired and works part-time as an office administrator for a church while living in Maryland. She is the mother of Rachel Morin, who was tragically murdered August 2023. Mr. Jim Desmond is a San Diego County Supervisor, a U.S. Navy veteran, and a retired 33-year Delta Airlines pilot and captain. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors oversees a region that spans over 4,200 square miles, and it includes 70 miles of Pacific coastline and shares a 60-mile international border with Mexico. With a population exceeding 3 million, San Diego County is the 5th most populous in the United States, presenting diverse challenges and opportunities. As supervisor, Jim plays a crucial role in shaping policies impacting the county's urban and rural communities. Prior to serving as county supervisor, Mr. Desmond served for 12 years as the mayor of San Marcos, California, in San Diego County. He has served on many local communities and commissions in his roles as county supervisor and mayor. Sheriff David Hathaway is the sheriff of Santa Cruz County, Arizona. After graduating from the University of Arizona, he started his law enforcement career as a deputy sheriff with the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office. He then embarked on a federal law enforcement career and worked in multiple DEA offices in the United States and in foreign countries, where he occupied various supervisory positions. His last assignment before retiring was as the head of the DEA office in Nogales. I thank all our witnesses for being here today, and I now recognize Mr. Heike for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, thank you for this opportunity. The only true consequence we have to slow down and discourage people from coming into the United States illegally is sending them back to their country of origin. Throughout the first 3+ years of this administration, I saw a steady decrease in the countries we could send people back to. For the first time in my 25 years, and under 5 different administrations, whether through neglect or on purpose, I saw a large-scale lapse in our ability to return people to their country of origin. The inability to send people home meant that most people being arrested for illegal entry would either have to be detained or released. The current administration, however, from day one, made a point of decreasing the amount of detention space available nationwide. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's funding for detention has steadily been cut and private detention eliminated. The fact that so many illegal aliens are being released into the United States spread worldwide very quickly. As this happened, the numbers the Border Patrol encountered illegally crossing the border increased exponentially. The impact to me and my agents were significant. Sectors were ordered to take in and process all the illegal aliens encountered on the border. The Border Patrol saw groups of hundreds and thousands coming into the United States and turning themselves in. These numbers pulled 80, 90, sometimes 100% of the agents on duty away from the border. Border Patrol zones across Texas, Arizona, and California had no agent presence for weeks and months at a time. Those who did not want to be caught could simply walk in. We have no idea who and what entered our country over this time. Throughout 2022 and 23, I sent agents to Texas and Arizona to count gotaways. Those sectors could not even put enough agents in the field to see what they'd missed. Simultaneously, in San Diego, we had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border. Fentanyl is another issue. The San Diego area sees between 80 and 90% of the methamphetamine and fentanyl seizures annually for our entire country. With little enforcement at the border, these drugs were coming through en masse. During my last year in San Diego, the price for a single pill of fentanyl, for example, went from $10 to 25 cents. To make matters worse, during 2022 and 23, I had to shut down San Diego traffic checkpoints, which are critical for drug interdiction, because the resources had been diverted to the process and release mission. The large numbers also had and still have a negative impact on the San Diego community. I had to release illegal aliens by the hundreds each day into communities who could not support them. To quiet the problem, 2 flights a week were provided from San Diego to Texas. These flights simply brought aliens that would have been released in San Diego over to Texas. Each flight cost approximately $150,000. This was the administration's way to try and quiet the border-wide crisis. Once these flights were stopped and the releases continued, California saw the true economic impact. I received calls from the governor's office, local mayors, and hospital administrators asking me if we could keep injured aliens in custody so the federal government would pay the medical bills. Through pressure from the administration, my headquarters became more interested in the fiction that being portrayed in the media and not at all concerned with reality. Each time we asked for help in dealing with a new issue, it fell on deaf ears. At times in San Diego, we had 2,000 or more aliens sitting in between the fences asking to turn themselves in. I was told to move them out of sight of the media. Meanwhile, Border Patrol agents are continually forgotten and neglected by the media and this administration. These agents deal with death, women and children that have been raped, abused, trafficked, bought and sold, families that have spent months in terrible conditions, sickness, and despair. If you look at the dramatic rise in the number of suicides within the Border Patrol, it is directly correlated with the migrant surge. The agents have been pushed beyond their limit, and this has greatly impacted their physical and mental health. While current numbers of aliens crossing our border are lower in comparison in recent months, there's a reason for this. After nearly 4 years, this administration finally started to ask Mexico for help in slowing down the traffic through their country. This and other actions make a difference, but why has it taken so long? All of these tactics were being used before this administration took office, but this administration stopped or greatly limited them. I'm also concerned this will not be maintained. The problems we are facing at the border have solutions. These solutions can be quite simple and cost far less than the mess currently occupying so much time and money. The return to a policy of enforcing the law and returning illegal aliens to their home countries is required. Thank you.
I'll recognize Ms. Morin for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, ranking members, and Congressmen. I appreciate this opportunity to tell Rachel's story. It started August 6th, 2023. I was in Kentucky. We had a grandbaby that had just passed away from sudden infant death. We got the phone call, and the phone call went something like this. Hello, Mom? There's somebody here that'd like to speak to you. Okay. Hello? Hello, Mrs. Morin? This is Detective so-and-so. There's no easy way to tell you this. We found your daughter's body. I had just learned a few hours earlier that she was missing. We didn't know she was missing. She went on a trail in our town that's very public, very small, and we've walked it for over 25 years. She grew up walking this trail. An illegal immigrant that was a getaway from El Salvador had waited for her on the trail. I was told that they grabbed her, dragged her through the woods, raped her, strangled her, murdered her. We were told that her body was blanketed in bruises. And I can tell you from looking at her when I went to the funeral home that it was probably the most graphic thing that I've ever seen. These murders are very horrendous. He then stuffed her into a drain pipe. So when the detective called and he said, Mrs. Morin, we found your daughter's body, you know that she's dead. It was such a complete shock to our whole family. It took 10 months for them to find this a suspected illegal immigrant. They used DNA because this man had attacked a 9-year-old and her mother in Los Angeles. If they had done the border protocols that were in place but was set aside of just a simple DNA swab, they would have known that he had a Interpol warrant for murder in his home country, and that's why he was fleeing to the United States. They say that the borders are safe. We live 1,800 miles away from the southern border. They're not safe. They're not safe. If you have a sanctuary city in your state, you're not safe. I just traveled up to New England. That's where I hail from, so I could just go get some rest. And I was surprised by the amount of immigrants from the Sudan and Congo, tens of thousands that are up there. We have them coming in our northern border. We're not safe. And I just hope and pray that you will listen to what we have to say. I'm trying to make my statement as short as I can so I don't cry. Rachel was, when she was a little girl, she was like a little spitfire, tiny little redhead. As an adult, she was this like vibrant, vivacious, outgoing person. Everybody just loved to know her. She was so compassionate and kind. She had a stammering problem, so she understood what it was like to be made fun of as a kid. So she was very compassionate towards people. She was a mom to 5 children. She was a businesswoman. She liked to exercise. She's the American mom. And she's not the only one in our cities that have been murdered. There was another murder by an illegal immigrant from El Salvador that happened a year before. And that person was just pleaded guilty to 4 murders, 2 rapes, and numerous other crimes. They are bringing criminals into our country. They are allowing them into our smallest towns, and our people are dying. There is a video that we'd like to play. I'll just finish my statement. Apparently it's not working. So I just want to take the time to thank you for allowing me to be here and to speak my daughter's story. And I had planned other things, but it is what it is.
Well, hopefully we get it. Are we close to getting it figured out, your team? We'll definitely do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll get it played here. Hopefully they'll figure that out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Morin. I now recognize Mr. Desmond for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak today. From September of 2023 to June of 2024, over 155,000 adult, prominently males, were between the ages of 18 to 35, who crossed our border illegally, were bussed and dropped onto the streets of San Diego County. That's an average of almost 600 per day, 7 days a week for 9 months. No community, no county, no country can sustain that type of an invasion of people crossing our borders illegally and being released into our communities without proper screening or vetting. I saw firsthand large vans and buses driven by Border Patrol agents pull into a San Diego County transit station and unload hundreds of people at a time. People who had just hours ago illegally crossed our borders, stepped off a shuttle, and were free to go into our communities, ahead of anyone legally trying to enter our country. The first question for many people that I approached at the transit stations was, where am I? And how do I get to Virginia, New York, or Denver? In Jacumba, California, a small border community about 50 miles east of San Diego, I came upon an early morning encampment of approximately 50 people who illegally crossed the border the night before. They were waiting for the Border Patrol to pick them up and process them, and then potentially be dropped in our streets. One man from India, traveling with his friends, said he paid $8,000 to an entity in India for the unimpeded passage across our southern border. That same morning in Jacumba, a Border Patrol agent told us that a group was coming across the border within the next half an hour. Soon, a black Suburban on the Mexico side of our broken fence sped across a dirt road, stopped, and dropped off about a dozen people, and then sped away. Men, women, and children wearing backpacks and pulling luggage crossed our border illegally, merely walking through a hole in the fence, approached the Border Patrol agent, and asked for asylum. Our Border Patrol has been reduced to processing agents, standing by, watching people break our laws. One officer told me with deep frustration that his orders from the federal government were clear: stand down, do not engage, just process. What's more alarming is what my team saw later was dozens of Chinese nationals dragging luggage down dirt roads at night. And this is not an isolated incident. This is a daily reality in San Diego County. Border Patrol has become their Uber driver from the border into the city of San Diego, and San Diego County has become their nationwide travel agents at the taxpayers' expense. San Diego County itself, we spent $6 million to set up a migrant receiving center to assist those dropped here, to move them more quickly to other parts of the country. These were local dollars that could have been spent on roads, infrastructure, and parks. Migrants slept in San Diego Airport. They stay in our homeless shelters, and our hospital and healthcare systems are strained. But what concerns me even more is our safety as a community and a country. Border Patrol agents do not have the time or resources or the proper ability to properly vet millions coming across our borders. I have witnessed and have brought samples of torn and shredded legal ID cards and passports that Mexico requires and we do not. These remnants and ID cards are left on the ground within the first few steps into the U.S. With no documentation, our agents cannot be sure of their countries of origin, restricting background checks and jeopardizing our safety. What really keeps me up at night are the gotaways, the one who illegally cross our borders, who don't ask for asylum. They bypass our Border Patrol. They come onto our shores, smuggling children and drugs by jet skis and boats. Boats are literally driven onto our beaches, abandoned, and the occupants run into our communities unimpeded because we are a sanctuary state. We have no idea who they are, where they're going, what their intentions are. They come and poof, disappear, making our county and our country unsafe. I want to close with a warning for those here today. Most of the people crossing the border illegally do not stay in San Diego County. We're the doormat. They disperse across the country. They are headed to states and cities across the United States with potentially very dangerous nationwide implications. The Biden-Harris administration created this mess, and they refuse to acknowledge it. The administration is not properly vetting the millions of people let into our communities, and they are making our border counties and our nation unsafe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. I now recognize Sheriff Hathaway for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Green and Ranking Member Thompson, for inviting me to testify to your committee. I am the sheriff of a county in Arizona, a border county. My county has the largest ports of entry with Mexico. Of all the border counties in Arizona, a large commercial port of entry, 2 large pedestrian ports of entry, a passenger vehicle port of entry, a railroad port of entry. So we have the largest volume of movement of any border county in Arizona. And our community is very safe. Crime rates are low. Crime rates are lower than the average for the state of Arizona, lower than Tucson, lower than Phoenix. But I do have concern over the growing police state and surveillance state in the U.S. Border Patrol has what is called extended border search authority. We call this the Constitution-free zone. Any area within 100 miles of the international border, Border Patrol does not need to have probable cause to search, to detain you, to interrogate you. And this includes 2/3 of the population of the U.S., cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, Washington, D.C., Miami, Houston. But our border community is safe, but there are things that Congress can do, and you need to act. If you don't act, presidential administrations will use executive action to solve these problems. In the current and the former administration, the executive branch is incentivized to come up with solutions because Congress has not acted. We have talked for years about comprehensive, immigration reform. There are things that can be done. First of all, we need to have a robust guest worker program. Title VIII needs to be revamped. Title VIII is the umbrella United States code that covers all aspects of immigration, asylum, visas. I have empathy for our federal partners because they don't know what they're allowed to do. They don't know, do we still have work visas, student visas, tourist visas? All the protocols with everything to do with the border are unclear. This is something Congress needs to define, make these hard decisions. And the asylum program is not the answer. Asylum was meant to be a little piece of the pie of Title VIII, for rare circumstances. Asylum, it's become the de facto way of issuing work permits, but asylum seekers can't even work for the first 6 months they're in the country. Canada is smart, and they've realized, hey, they've imported tens of thousands of cleared asylum seekers into Canada to work there because they can't work here. They have the same problem we do. They have an aging population, they lack younger workers, and they've taken advantage of this kind of broken system to get more workers into their country. So I want to keep my 5 minutes simple here. 2 clear takeaways that I think Congress needs to do so that the executive branch isn't incentivized to take action. 1 is a guest worker program. Make that clear, articulate that, figure that out. Consider things like the Farm Modernization Act that has languished for years. There has been pressure from the business community on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, to pass the Farm Modernization Act that would allow more H-2A agricultural visas. My family is a ranching family. We've been in the border of Arizona for 5 generations. It was a lot easier for my grandfather to hire somebody from Mexico if American workers weren't available. But now it's unclear what the protocols are for getting work permits. Another thing that's needed, and this was in the bipartisan border bill that wasn't passed, is immigration judges right at the border. And this was in the bill. There were some things in that bill I did not agree with. But if we're going to be, infatuated with the idea everyone needs a piece of paper to approve before they can do a voluntary interaction with an American, well, get the officials right at the border that can make those decisions. The bipartisan border bill actually had in it the paralegals, the immigration judges, and the staff so that people can come up to the border, present their piece of paper, make their claim, and if the answer is yes, it's yes. If the answer is no, it's no. And this is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. In the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, you had record years, over 1 million. This included Democrat and Republican administrations, and then there was a 14-year lull after that included all 8 years of Obama, last 2 years of Bush Jr., and all 4 years of Trump. So this is a cyclical thing, and I think it's disingenuous to try to paint it as a Democrat versus Republican thing. My time's up, so thank you.
Thank you. Members will be recognized by order of seniority with an exception granted due to some scheduling issues today as necessary for their 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be called after all members have been recognized. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Heike, you served as the last job, you were the sector chief of one of our 9 southwest border sectors. And I think you said you worked for 25 years in the Border Patrol under 5 different administrations. And looking at your statement, you said this was the first time under 5 administrations, whether through neglect or on purpose, I saw large-scale lapses in our ability to return people to their country. of origin. You then went on and talked about detention and how detention bed space was intentionally decreased and private detention was essentially done away with. You said that word got out and then the masses came, essentially. I'm paraphrasing you. But I want to go back to your comment about whether it was neglectful or purposeful, because if you intentionally stop returning people, that's not something you just, neglect. And you intentionally decrease detention, those things that actually decrease the incentive for people to come here. That sounds purposeful to me. So would you answer? I mean, do you think it's neglect, or do you think this was purposeful, designed to be this way?
I believe that the actions were purposeful, yes, sir. Many people don't understand that we can't simply fill a plane full of nationals from a certain country and fly them home. It takes agreements with that country. It takes diplomacy with the State Department to make those arrangements. And they're long-term arrangements. It takes diplomacy over months and years.
But purposeful.
But purposeful.
Purposeful, okay. So you mentioned, too, that there were massive periods of time when the border was just left completely open because the agents had to be pulled and you were directed to do this. And how long were those agents just completely off the border and miles of the border wide open?
There were weeks and even months at a time between Texas and parts of Arizona and California.
And I assume that's, we want to look at these 8 ISIS folks that were caught in New York. I guess some of them actually crossed at a crossing. They filled out the CBP-1 app, 3 of them, and came into the country and were going to blow up an LGBTQ place in Philadelphia. But I mean, those people that crossed during that time, any guarantees that they're not out there to do harm to the country?
No, sir, no guarantees.
Yeah, you agree with the FBI director then. You mentioned it twice in your testimony, too. I find it fascinating that because it was overwhelming San Diego, the administration actually created, for the cost of $150,000, plane flights to Texas of all these people as a way to keep it quiet. And then you mentioned, too, there was one point where you had like 2,000 aliens and the administration directed you to like move them out of sight of the media. Can you kind of clarify that a little bit?
Yes, sir. Groups were coming in to turn themselves over faster than we could keep up. We only had so much space. We keep people within our stations. There's no other place to put them in while they're being processed. And they were building up. The media was showing them sitting in between the fences, and it looked bad, and they wanted them moved. I had no place to put them. And so they simply told me.
Why would they want to hide that? Why wouldn't they want the world to know what's going on? Why would they want to hide that? Why would they want to spend $150,000 to fly them to Texas to keep people from seeing the mass waves? Why?
It looks bad. When I asked about the flights to Texas, I was very specifically told there's a problem in Texas, there isn't a problem in California.
Wow. So purposeful policies wreaking havoc on a community, and we'll just hide it. Perfect. Thank you. Ms. Morin, you've previously said that President Biden hasn't really showed any concern for anything the American people have voiced on this issue. It's like he's sitting in an ivory tower and we're just down here. He's not connected with the everyday person. Can you talk more about your frustrations with the administration and their handling of the border? Yes.
Since my daughter's death, but also since we learned that it was an illegal immigrant that they've accused of murdering her, the Biden-Harris administration has not reached out to our family to offer condolences. And I've noticed that when speaking about the border policy, they would rather look in the other direction, kind of like a little kid. If I don't see you, you don't see me. And I think that they are trying to avoid admitting that there is an issue, even though tens of thousands of people a day, women and children, are being attacked. Not all of them are in the news because some of them are not being murdered, they're just being attacked. I have people come up to me all the time because I know I'm Rachel's mom, and they'll say, a guy came up from behind me, grabbed me around the neck, and tried to pull me down to the ground. But I got away, and I went to the police, and I told the police, and when they arrested the person, they found out that he had already attacked several other women. So it's happening on a daily basis. Not all of it is in the news. And so this issue is bigger than people think, and it's not just the southern border, because we're almost 2,000 miles from the southern border. It's every state, every county, every city. People are living in fear, and just because you ignore it and don't acknowledge it doesn't mean that it's not true.
Thank you. I yield to the ranking member for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you very much.